Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Serena, and in today's video we're going to be sewing up a 1950s Butterick pattern. I'm super excited to make this pattern. I've had it for a while in my stash, just waiting for the perfect fabric, and I think I figured it out. So if you're interested in seeing me sew up this spring summer dress, then go ahead and like and subscribe, and let's get into the pattern and the fabric. For today's pattern, we're using Butterick 8074 in a bust 31.5 size 11. And it comes in two different views, or three really. View A, which is a full skirted dress in a single fabric. And then you have view B, which is also a full skirted dress, but with a contrasting fabric for the detailed yoke in the front. And then you have view C, which is a slim wiggle skirt with the same bodice detail as view A. You have the pattern pieces as well as the yardage necessary and all of the sizes and fabric suggestions. Now let's get on to the fabric. For the fabric, we're going with this kind of like a sunset striped fabric. I think the colors are very reminiscent of a sunset, maybe on the water where you have a tree line. And we're gonna use this fabric, and when I work with stripes, I love to do different angles and like really utilize the stripes in the design of the dress. So because of that yoke detail, I want to play around with the stripes on this dress. And so yeah, I'm really excited to work with this fabric. So let's get into sewing. Starting with the darts and the bodice, I am marking all of the darts on the bodice. Technically, you should start with the skirt on this dress because it is cut a little bit on the bias and you want to give it a day or two to hang on the dress form. But I knew I was working really quickly, so I decided to just go ahead and start with the bodice anyway because I knew I was going to be cutting the skirt and setting it to hang the same night. So I'm sewing all of the darts, and it will look very continuous because I marked all of the darts on both the front and the back of the bodice, so that way I could sit down and do all the sewing at once. I did mention that I am going to be playing with the stripes a little, so I think it's really important to tell you what direction the fabric is going in on the grain. On the grain, the stripes are vertical, so when I cut the yoke, which will be cut on the bias, that will make the stripes go diagonal. When working with vertical stripes, I find that there's not that much pattern matching to do, so take great care to make sure that you line up your darts properly because that's when the stripes will really matter. Usually on a skirt like this, pattern matching also matters because you'll get little chevrons on the side seams, but this skirt is pleated, so it will cover up the side seams and the center seam. Once all the darts are in the bodice, it's time to add the yoke, and this is done by pressing under 5/8 seam allowance on the yoke and then top stitching it onto the bodice. And also to get that cowl look at the neckline, there are 4 pleats, 2 on each side of the yoke. I love really high necklines, so this pattern had my heart. And I don't know why it took me so long to make this pattern. I knew I wanted to have like the perfect fabric for it because it does come off as really plain in the front because it goes up so high, and the bodice itself is pretty simple if you look past the yoke. So I wanted something very dynamic, and I'm not gonna lie, while sewing this up in the stripes, I was a little concerned that it might be too busy, not only because I was working with stripes, but because I knew I was going to be putting them in different directions. But I stuck with it, and I'm glad I did. Once the yoke is attached, you're going to want to turn it over and use some bias tape to cover up the raw seams on the yoke. I went with pre-made bias tape because I had some, but of course you can always make it yourself. And I do find the bias tape that's made with the same fabric sits nicely or nicer. Moving on to the back bodice, it's time to add the facing to it, and we're still working with the bodice pieces separately. So I'm going to sew this down 5/8 seam allowance, making sure that I pay great attention to the center point. So when I turn it, the V is very crisp. As you can see, the back of this pattern has like a low neckline. This is a really cute detail. Also, it makes putting this over your head a lot easier since the zipper is located on the side. So it's less of a hassle to get this over your head with the back being wide open. Once your sewing is complete, clip the centers, press the seam allowance towards the facing, and then you're going to go in and understitch because we do not want that facing to flip forward to where you can see it on the outside. And yeah, It's going to make for a very crispy turn. It's going to look really nice. So don't skip this step because it's very important to the overall look. If you have made it this far and you're enjoying yourself, please consider liking this video to help push it through the algorithm and get it to those who might be interested in watching. Also, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I'd love to have you stick around. Now that both sides of the bodice are complete, it's time to combine them at the shoulder seam, and you want to make sure that you don't sew over the facing piece on the front of the bodice because you're going to fold that over to hide the shoulder seams. Once the shoulder seams are attached, I do set the bodice aside so that way I can cut the skirt because I do need to get this hanging. It's definitely something I cannot stress enough. If you're in a hurry, cut the skirt first and have it hanging already. I just wanted to go ahead and knock the bodice out, and so that's why I did it in the opposite way. But yeah, I cut out the skirt and then I pin all the pleats in place. And for the skirt, the seam finishes are going to be French seams. So that way it looks really nice. This is the unlined skirt, so the seams really mattered to me. And with the bodice having the yoke covered with the seam binding or the bias tape, and then I do a French seam on one side and then I leave the seam open for the zipper on the other side. So I French seam the skirt so that way everything looks really nice. I finished up the skirt and I set it to hang before I hem it. And now I'm back to working on the bodice. I finished the armholes because it is sleeveless with some bias tape that I made myself. And I tell you every single time you have to cover a curved edge with bias tape that you should press the bias tape into the shape of the curved area that you're putting it in. This way, when you flip it over and hand sew it down, everything lays nice and flat and it doesn't pull on the bodice itself and leave a very bumpy, unflattering look. I did not do any alterations to this bodice, though I should have. I should have reduced some of the length because I do have a shorter torso, and I find bodices like these that have that appear to be longer in the torso definitely are. I did a pattern fitting, but I guess I did not I don't think I placed the pattern properly on the dress form when I did the pattern fitting because the neckline is much higher than I put it. I don't know. I didn't do it properly. Usually a pattern fitting on my dress form is enough to get me through. In this case, the bodice is about a ½ inch too long, and you can definitely tell because the back has that V cutout, and so it tends to be a little bit more loose on me. So if I make this again, this style again, then I am going to shorten the bodice about a ½ inch. I did make the slim wiggle dress version immediately afterwards, and I did the alterations, and it is perfect. Thanks to the belt on the full skirt, well, on both options, I love a good matching belt. Because of the belt, it was able to kind of like hide the imperfection a little. I was able to tighten it up a bit and make it as though my waist was lower. In general, you would like for it to stop at the waist that your waist is actually at. So now I'm attaching the skirt to the bodice and we are almost done. I'm trying to make sure that the pleats line up perfectly on the bodice. Because the center front and the center back are really important for matching up, even though you don't really have to match the stripes or the pattern in any other way. I did try and make it to where it matches on the bodice and the skirt. We are almost done. All that's left to do is to hem the skirt, finish the waistline, which I used my serger for that, and to add the zipper. For the zipper, always make sure that you interface the opening before you add the zipper to make sure that you don't stretch your fabric out because that is very common for when working or inserting a zipper. It's very common to stretch that out. So do not skip the step and always interface that opening. This pattern is marked as a quick and easy pattern, and I know that has a lot more to do with the amount of pattern pieces than the sewing process, but I would have to agree it was pretty quick and easy. I really enjoyed this pattern, and after reviewing a modern reproduction, it was refreshing to get back to what I enjoy and what I was used to, the security of knowing that it will fit and look lovely. And this is the final look, and this is what it looks like on. I really enjoyed the process of sewing this. I also like the results. Let me know your thoughts and opinions below. If you enjoyed this video, again, like and subscribe. If you would like to support this channel any further, you can leave me a virtual tip over on Ko-fi or become a bobbin over on Patreon. We would absolutely love to have you. And of course, the most effective free way to support my channel is to leave me a comment, like, and share this video with someone you think might be interested. I even included a little clip of the second dress that I made right after, inspired by Barbie's lunch on the terrace outfit. Bye!